On podcast tips tonight, I've got a live show that has a bunch of guests on from Podcast Movement, the big conference out of Los Angeles that's going on right now. And so I appreciate you being here with me and joining me on this unusual show. And so what we're going to do tonight, I kind of wanted to explain to everybody what the format is of what I'm doing here, so nobody's unexpected in what's going to happen here. But so I'm doing this show. I'm on the East Coast, and I'm going to bring in a bunch of guests into the program that are currently at Podcast Movement in Los Angeles right now. So both of my guests are actually at the conference right now, and I'm hoping to get their observations about the show and kind of their observations also about what's happening in the podcasting space right now and what they're seeing at the show and at the event. So we're going to take your questions, and feel free to post them in here, and we will address them as best we can. But fully anticipate kind of like a churning cast here of various people that are going to be calling in from the conference. And so a few people will drop off a little early, and some people will probably stick with me for most of the show. So that's the format, and it's all a little bit of a loose gamble, but that's kind of what live streaming is all about, is kind of like putting yourself out there and hoping that people will participate and get involved in what this show is all about. So let's go ahead and bring in the first couple of guests that I have on the show. I have Sethi, who is with me here. So let me pull him up on the stage as well. And I also have Fatima, also, who is also with me. And Fatima is the CEO of a company called Quill and co-host, which is a podcast hosting, and then also does podcast brand development type programs. And Sam runs a platform called TrueFans at truefans.fm, and is also the co-host of the Pod News Weekly podcast with James Cridlin. So welcome both of you guys for stepping up and joining me here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Yeah. So what are you guys seeing out there with Podcast Movement? What's the attendance like? What is going on at the event? And what's kind of your gut vibe about what's currently happening at the event? And is it something different than both of you guys have experienced in the past? And just your surface observation so far. I know it's only been a couple of days, but go ahead.
Fatima, ladies first.
Oh, thank you. I would say that, it's really great to see industry friends and a good, decent turnout. They picked a really great location right downtown LA. The hotel is amazing. But ultimately, I would say that some really great sessions and conversations happening, audience growth on analytics and insights, how to scale your audiences, and podcasting and AI are like the main hot topics, I would say. Amy Fuller was here earlier today, and she was amazing. And generally, just it's business as usual in a brand new location where we can see the Hollywood sign right outside of our window.
Well, that's certainly close to Hollywood. There's no question about that, right? So, and Sam, what's your thoughts on what's happening at the event?
Well, back here after 2 years. So again, I agree with Fatima a lot. Some of the focus has been clearly on AI and podcasting, video as well. And I think new monetization strategies have been pretty high. So again, value for value, and it's touched the edge. I think we're beginning to see people looking outside of just pure advertising or subscription as a way to monetize. So that's been good. In terms of the crowd, I think it's a really weird thing. We had the Ambies yesterday, and I was saying to people I know, friends in the industry from hosting companies and apps, that these people who went to the Ambies are like a different podcasting industry to the one I'm involved in.
100%.
Yeah, and it's weird because I want to know those people. They're winning awards, they're creating great podcasts, but they sort of live in this sort of bubble over here, and we, the hosts, the people creating the platforms, live in another bubble. And I don't know how that works, but That's one weird one. And then lastly, I'll give a shout out to my friend James Cridland, who did a great keynote this morning, um, basically showing where the industry growth is and
Hmm.
sort of giving YouTube a little bit of a nudge and a kick to say, look, um, you are in podcasting, but you're sort of dipping your little toes in and not really getting involved. So are you in or out of podcasting? But Apple still the number one, Spotify the number two, and then everyone else behind them, really.
Yeah, I think
Sam,
that's a good observation. Yeah, go
I
ahead,
was
Pat.
just curious to see like your perspective and hear what you think about the attendance. Do you feel like it's a newer crowd this time, or do you feel like it's a lot of the same people? From my limited perspective, because I only came in last night,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's really tapered down in terms of the industry folks sending their larger extended teams. It's like now we're only seeing one representative, if that, even from organizations. And I feel like we've seen a big scale back from a lot of organizations
Mm-hmm.
participating. That's just my very like high level perspective today and couple of hours of yesterday. But I'm wondering, am I going to see everyone later at Triton's Drinks and the iHeart Party, or have we seen like a reduction in terms of attendance?
I think you're right. I think there's fewer people. I think one of the things I'd contrast and compare is London podcast show to podcast
Mm-hmm.
movement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I find really weird about this show is it's just too spaced out. I can literally
Yeah.
walk miles and miles and miles, and everyone is in one part of the building or another. And what London does is it keeps everyone in a tight area, and it
Yes.
and it feels buzzy, and you feel there's lots of people. There may not be any more people than there are here, but it feels like there's a lot more people. And
Yeah.
because of that, you get a little bit of a sort of an extra rush. Oh wow, look at all those people. Why are they going to that room? Okay, I'll go there or whatever. But here, everything feels like it's like if you walk up that corridor and walk 14 miles the other way and turn left, you'll find an event. And then if you go the other way downstairs 3 floors, there'll be someone else. And it's too spaced out for my liking. That's
I think I completely agree with you. And Rob, just so that
Mhm.
you have some context, we sponsor the podcast show as well as podcast movement.
Yeah.
And I will say it's been quite a different experience in terms of the level of just the caliber of people that they bring out in terms of making sure that there's representation across the board with brands, independent creators, agencies, publishers, networks. It's pretty evenly split at the podcast show, whereas at this conference, I feel like it's definitely heavily leaning towards industry professionals and not as much representation in the other categories and verticals. And I would say there's a certain level of like organization and polish that comes with the podcast show, which I haven't seen yet.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting timing because they're both very directly competitive. So I'm curious to see if people are going to gravitate towards more of the European London shows, or we'll continue to see the same turnout that we've seen in previous years.
Yes, I would agree. I think the difference between the podcast show in London, is a little bit more like a podcast festival. I mean, it's a celebration of the medium from the content side to some degree with the industry side. And that's something that podcast movement has never really tried to attempt to do. But I do have Mr. Gordon Firemark has joined us. He's the podcast lawyer and is a big live streamer and streamer online too. So Gordon, thank you so much for hopping on and joining us.
Well, hi, Rob. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm in the car and
It's fine.
a
That's
little
fine.
distracted, but great.
So, what's your observation of podcast movements and what's going on there? I know that the whole panel here has been talking about what they're seeing at the events and what kind of the vibe is that you experienced there.
Well, my sense of the been similar to prior podcast movement evolutions events.
Mm-hmm.
A little more of the business-oriented folks, lots of, just more folks that are coming from the corporate side of things than at the main podcast movement event, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of them for the industry, but turnout didn't feel quite as big as I've seen in the past.
Yeah,
but maybe that's
agreed.
just the first days. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting time for podcasting. And Beauty Bubble has a comment in here. The podcast movement event is beaming with content on X, and it seems like I'm not seeing a lot of social posts on Facebook, and there's a few out there, but it does seem like it's fairly light, and it's the same thing with the Instagram.
100%.
Yeah, have you guys seen that as well? And I wonder
Mhm.
why there's not as much kind of social activity around podcast movement like there used to be. Is there any idea that you guys have?
I mean, it's tough. I feel like the conference maybe needs to do a little bit more to mix things up. I mean, it's tough to keep an event going and scaling at the rate that they have in the past. And I do agree with my fellow panelists, which is the attendance has definitely gone down. And I think, I don't know if it's like a cost savings thing. I heard rumors in the past few weeks that they're thinking about doing the next podcast movement, not Evolutions, but the one after DC in Dallas. And I don't think everyone had a good experience at the last podcast movement in Dallas. So I'm surprised that they would pick the same location with all the locuses. And I don't know if it's a cost savings thing
Well,
or
it certainly could be. I agree with you. Yeah.
it shows like I think the hotel here is lovely, so I don't want to take away
Mhm.
from that, but I feel like there are certain areas where corners have been cut, and that's just my like honest and candid feedback.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a tough time in the economy right now, and
Mhm.
I can totally appreciate. I mean, I've been to every one of the podcast movement events up till this one, so this is the first one I've missed. And it's always been this gradual shift that the industry has been moving towards podcast movement really being an industry event,
Mhm.
not a podcaster event per se. That's not to say that there aren't podcasters there, and
Mhm.
podcasters are a big contributor to what's on stage and what's being presented, but it's really a reason for the industry to kind of get together and do deals and maybe do some learnings as well. But I don't get a sense that a lot of the attendees actually spend a lot of time in sessions. They're
Right. Well,
actually
that's it.
spending time in meetings and going out to dinner and working booths and things like that. So it's a little
Yeah.
bit of a shift. And if you think about like Podfest down in Orlando, it's definitely much more of a podcaster event.
Mhm.
So yeah, are all of you planning on going to the podcast movement in Washington, D.C. in the summer?
Yeah, we're
No,
sponsoring the growth stage.
You are?
That's
Okay.
Mhm.
yeah, no, I won't be there.
So I
Summer
wanted to ask,
vacation with the family.
It's
yes, I wanted
technically
to
not
ask,
in DC.
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's an expensive place to go to, too.
I'm sure it's lovely.
Yeah. And then also, what are you guys seeing around video? I know, Sam, you had mentioned to me before the show that there was a little bit of a debate going on around whether or not, and James Cridlin commented this about YouTube, kind of like half in, half out type of a situation with podcasting. What's your thoughts about the feeling that's coming out of the event?
My view is this: look, anything that's delivered by RSS is fine by me, right? That's the distribution. So when I look at True Fans, my own platform, we don't call ourselves a podcast platform. We call ourselves an RSS marketplace, and the reason is we are ingesting podcasts, music, courses, video, books, and events. And so all of those are being delivered by RSS to my platform. So I don't have an issue with the creator being a multi-channel creator, whether they want to create audio only, audio and audio, video, live events, audio, video, something else, blogs even, because that's part of RSS. So anything that's delivered through that RSS distribution mechanism is fine by me. And I think we've just got to get over the fact that podcasting is just one of 4 or 5 different RSS type digital content pieces. So we're seeing a massive uplift in people moving off Spotify, independent music artists, putting their content into RSS and delivering that to RSS apps. We're seeing Spotify announced that they're trialing in the UK online video courses via RSS. And again, we've got that as well. So I think we have to get over the fact that YouTube is or isn't doing podcasting, as long as it's delivered or ingested via RSS, then I have no issue. Then it becomes a case of, great, Spotify does audio books, it does podcasts, it does music, it does courses, Apple does video. So I don't think podcasting now covers the full gamut of the digital content that's being delivered via RSS. And I think we need to start to thinking more about what the platforms deliver as an aggregated marketplace rather than just singly, it only delivers audio podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think that's the direction the industry seems to be pointing to increasingly. There is a lot of kind of internal resistance to that, to some degree, of trying to change the models, kind of be more inclusive of different opportunities for podcasting and
Mm-hmm.
Fatima, what do you think about that? I mean, as you work with your brand clients and your hosting clients, are you seeing a much more open mind to what podcasting is?
Oh, definitely. I feel like the industry has evolved so much. And, in the 90s, in the 80s, you had a phone number for your business. In the 90s, it was social media. In the 2000s, it was, Twitter. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, it's the wave of audio and also video scaling. I mean, I think the numbers and stats really speak for itself. 93% of people who start a podcast episode end up listening to the entire 30-minute format content, whereas 30-minute video only has a 12% completion rate. And from a stats perspective, the disparity is because when you add a video screen, it loses the flexibility. You can be driving to work and listening to a podcast, but you can't be watching a video. You can
Right.
be, walking your dog or doing the dishes and listening to a podcast, but you can't be watching a video. And so it's not that I don't think people should be video podcasting. I think you just need to be really strategic about whether it makes sense for the target audience you're trying to reach. And so with our brands and clients, what objective is video serving for your podcast? Is it because you're trying to reach a younger audience on YouTube? Then perhaps it makes sense. Our product co-host can actually show you what platforms your listeners are active on, like which channels on social. And so if we identify YouTube as a dominant social platform for our users' listeners, then it makes sense to be on YouTube as a video series and prioritize investing those dollars into creating a high quality video production. But otherwise, I would say the nature of podcasting was meant for people to consume content in different ways. And some people prefer listening, some people prefer reading, some people prefer watching. And so you have to meet your audiences where they are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And a little bit of the reason why I'm doing this show and I'm working with a platform like a StreamYard is that I can see this kind of integration between audio and video increasingly being something that is really embraced by brands as well as individual creators and networks and things like that. It's a great way to multitask, and you're exactly correct that listeners out there, some prefer to watch and some prefer to listen, and some of them like to be able to do both. It depends on what their availability is, where they happen to be. I mean, I like to watch a lot of video podcasts on my television through like a YouTube but also it'd be great if I could watch them increasingly as a true video podcast too, which is I'm doing with this show. So this show is going to be put out as a audio and video podcast. So you'll be able to download the MP4 file of this into your podcast viewing app. And not all of them support video, but it's certainly something that I wanted to embrace with this show as an example, just to say, well, you can do it. Apple supports video podcasting. There's a lot of people that are surprised to hear that video is supported by Apple Podcasts.
I didn't realize that. Actually, this is really interesting. So do you have to host with a particular platform in order to be able to video podcast on Apple? Like I know in Spotify, you have to be on Anchor or Spotify for podcasters.
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of history. The beginning era of podcasting, there was really only like 2 or 3 podcast hosts. And because the early era of podcasting supported about 30-40% of the medium was video, those hosting platforms that existed, Libsyn, Blueberry, Podbean, they were kind of forced because the market was demanding that to support video podcasting. And those are the 3 platforms that do today, still support it. It's a little more expensive. And so what happened is that in those early days, there was a lot of distribution of video in the podcasting space. And then YouTube kicked off and launched in like 2007 or something like that, that time frame. And it started to siphon off all the video podcasters that moved their content over to YouTube. And so subsequently, we saw a decline in the video podcasting side of podcasting because of that. And so it's only been the last couple of years that I think we've seen a resurgence in interest in video around video podcasting. And then finally, YouTube decides that they're going to get in a little bit, put their foot in the door to open it back up again and to be seen as a podcast consumption platform. And that's why we're seeing this renewed interest in doing this and calling it a video podcast, even though if you were to ask Sam or many others in the medium, if it's not distributed by RSS, it's really not a podcast, right? So there is an argument for that fact, that what YouTube is doing with video is not really a podcast. But I think as you look at it from a listener or a consumer side of this, that's what they're seeing as a podcast. So if they see Joe Rogan talking on a microphone in Spotify on a video, they still think he's doing a podcast. So that's kind of what's driving this. I know, Sam, do you have any thoughts on this? And Gordon also.
Yeah, I mean, go on, Gordon, if you want to have a say. You're muted, mate.
Yeah.
You're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Gordon's back.
I don't think. Am I muted or you hear me out?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
I
off
don't
mute
think
now.
consumers care about how it's delivered. I think they just care about a relatively seamless and consuming experience. And YouTube has really got that down. They've really figured that out. An RSS delivered podcasts in the apps that do video, they do a pretty good job of it too. And as you said, the history and all that has been a factor. I mean, if I was a podcast hosting company, my big concern would be the day YouTube decides to offer an outbound RSS feed that you can subscribe to in any other tool. They have reasons they might not do that, but that would be a game changer. I think the consumer really just cares about the good content and how to get it.
Yeah.
I agree that the consumer doesn't care about how it's delivered, as in how it's distributed. They don't care about RSS. Sorry, Gordon, can you just mute it because of the car just for a sec? Sorry, mate.
Yeah, I just did. So we're good.
Oh, okay. One of the things I've been talking to today is Blueberry, Buzzsprout, RSS.com, Transistor, about supporting a new extension to RSS called the Alternative Enclosure. And it's taken a while for people to understand, but what the alternative enclosure allows you to do within the same feed is to embed your link to your video or alternative audio quality files. So that is, I think, a really important one. So for you, Rob, for example, you could have this as an audio podcast and then put it onto YouTube, but take the URL of the YouTube video and put that in the alternative closure within your feed. And so if someone was on an app where it supports both audio and video, they could switch between the two, whether they want to watch it or view it, right? They don't have to then switch to YouTube to watch you and back to a podcast app to listen to you. It then stays within the one app. So that's something that I think we're going to see quite a bit of. The other one is I spent today with Adobe and with Wondercraft, two really very cool guys, Jay LeBeouf and Oscar Saranda, talking about translations. And what Jay was asking was, how do Adobe can do real-time translations of audio into multiple languages with transcription, right? But he wasn't sure how that would then be presented within a podcast app. So I explained to him what the alternative enclosure does. And so not only could you embed the secondary video and maybe audio quality, but you could also put alternative language versions of your audio from Adobe, for example. So you might have a Hindi and a Japanese and an Arabic version of your audio podcast done through Adobe. So you're not re-recording. And then that could give the user within the app the option to switch, and the transcription would switch to the language of the audio as well.
Right.
And so the alternative enclosure, I think, is going to be one of the most important tags for 2024, where people are going to be able to aggregate different things within the same feed. So again, I can have my primary enclosure, my secondary alternative enclosure being video, as well as language differences. So Stephen Bartlett, for example, from Diary of a CEO, has got an Arabic, Hindi, and Spanish version of his UK English podcast done by Wondercraft. And his growth in his podcast audience has been significant because suddenly, without him having to do any more work, really, he's now reaching out to new language audiences, and that has seen a massive uplift in his reach. So I think, again, this is where I think the user doesn't need to care that the distribution is via RSS. They're just consuming it. But the actual creators should care, because they can build it once in one RSS feed and distribute it to multiple places. And that is that, create once, deliver many times, I think is going to be a much more important part of opening up new markets and extending their reach to new users.
Yeah, and to kind of build off of that, YouTube is going to be translating all the content into all languages as well.
Right.
And applying some AI to it to make it look like it's coming out of your mouth.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the last word that I heard about what was happening there with this whole translation opportunity that the podcast that you were talking to, the Diary of the CEO podcast, which I watch on YouTube as well, and he's done a terrific job with that show. It's very interesting. I love the kind of intro that he does, the cold open that he does to some degree, but it's kind of a kind of like done to engage the viewer and to ask questions in their mind that they want to get answered in the content. That hopefully, I think he's hoping that keeps people listening or watching. So I don't know. I mean, do you happen to know, is that Diary of a CEO, is that a audio podcast as well yet? Do you know?
Yeah.
It is.
It was started off with Stephen producing the YouTube video, and then getting it with his team put into every podcast directory. So that's how it was done. And then clearly, he's got a big team behind him. So, they take a lot of audio clips, they take a lot of video clips, they're using social media extensively to reach, out to people, to show, and bring people back in. So they'll take juicy parts of the video and clip out and then get people back. And I think, as I said, him extending it to multiple languages is the next, way of growing it. The singer Dua Lipa has a interesting, different play on it. She didn't have her voice translated into another language because she's such a distinctive artist with her own voice. So they did it a bit like, when you hear the UN, you can hear the Russian UN speaker, and then you hear the translation in the background from the English translator. So she did it in that way, where she would speak to the guest, and then overlaid, like an overdub on top, would be another person's voice. I don't think that works very well personally, but that's how she's done it. Now, Gordon and I met actually here for the first time, didn't we, Gordon, the other night? Had a nice beer, and one of the things that we talked about was licensing within podcasting, and how with the way that music's coming into podcasting, and the way that so I was talking to him about this new podcasting license that's come about, which again is something that people need to start to consider. So let me try and explain it. One of the things we do is we take clips from other people's podcasts, and we use fair use as the argument of using someone else's content, and we think that's acceptable. Now there are models where you could actually make payment to the podcaster for taking a clip from their podcast. So now you start to have the need for podcasters to have a license to say, yep, you're allowed to take content from my podcast, or no, keep your hands off my podcast, you can't take a clip. So this new podcast license grants other podcasters rights to your podcast to use for clips, basically. Yeah.
Gordon, what's your thoughts on that? Did you get a chance to hear that comment from
Yeah, I
from Sam?
heard most of it, and Sam and I had a nice conversation about that yesterday, I guess it was. Look, I think it's high time that the licensing, a more robust licensing approach was available for podcasters and both creators and the music industry as well, to have a way to get that content into other productions and fairly compensated for it. It's not without its problems. It's not, fair use is it's part of the law. So I don't see people who've been relying on fair use necessarily opting to even a micropayment model to pay to use stuff that they, and I don't see that law changing anytime soon. But I think there's a lot of room for maybe the more fair-minded folks will want to do something about it and pay. But I do think it's great for creators of content to be able to say to the world, well, it's not just Creative Commons. Here are some other ways you can use my stuff, on terms that we've laid out, and receive a small payment for things. I think that's
I think that's a great idea.
Important development.
So Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about True Fans and what you're trying to accomplish there, and kind of how that dovetails to what we're talking about alternative enclosures and those kind of opportunities.
Yeah, so True Fans is as I said, an RSS marketplace rather than just a pure podcast app. It's designed to be what we call a progressive web app. So it works on any screen size because it sizes down from a phone to an iPad to a full desktop. It's not an iOS or Android app. I call it iOS Flash 2. It's proprietary and it's singularly owned by Apple. So again, if you're using iOS, which we've all been taught to do by Apple very cleverly, but it's not web standards, it's not got any SEO in it. So I didn't build an iOS app. And the other thing about it is Apple can ban you from their store in a heartbeat. So, if I wanted to make a feature change, I have to get Apple's permission to make that change before it's published. And I didn't want to be beholden. So this platform that I've built. So Rob, I don't know if you're logged in or not, because I can't see where it shows the music and various bits at the top.
I don't think I'm logged in right now. So
okay, I'll send you. I can send you my in the background. Anyway, look, don't worry about it.
Sure.
The idea, if you click through to a show, click through to value. So click on just click on the graphic and it'll take you through to show that playing. So just click on the graphic and it'll take you through to the next layer.
There you go.
So what we've done is taken RSS and we've said, look, we'll take all of the stuff that comes out of it. You can see the episodes and you can sort them, you can go through them. If you click on that little eye icon in the middle there, just up a bit, Rob.
This one?
Click on that, yeah. So you can see now all about that podcast, when it was created, how many seasons, how many episodes, who hosts it. So we give you all that metadata about it, and we show you the last few episodes, how long they were, when it's often, so its last episode was Sunday. It's a weekly show, roughly about 25 minutes, and all of the podcasting tags it currently supports. So again, we're trying to give you a little bit more information about it, but fundamentally, you can just play that show if you wanted to. You're not logged in, Rob, but if you played that show, you don't have to pay to play. You could put 0 in and just play it as you would like an Apple podcast, where you pay nothing. Or you can choose to support the content creator by giving them small micro payments. So again, that's just a new model. So you've got advertising is one model of supporting creators. You've got subscriptions is another model of supporting creators. And this third model, which is very, very new, and it's not for everybody right now, is a way of using small micro transactions of 10 cents or 20 cents to give to a creator, and if they get 100 people doing that, that's a decent amount of money, better than they would from, let's say, trying to get a CPM rate on advertising. So there are different models appearing for monetization now. And we as a platform are focused on microtransactions.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting is people are saying, well, is that really a model? So Pocket FM out of India raised 103 million this week for their round of funding with a 750 million valuation, and they do microtransactions. There's another company called Sheekonomics about to announce their round of funding, and they do microtransactions. So you begin to see people say, actually, if I can build up a niche with my audience, so I've got a knitting podcast and I've got 50 people who support me and they pay me directly in micro payments, then I've got a sustainable podcast where I can actually work with my audience, and advertisers still can advertise across that niche if they want to. But if they don't, then actually I can just get my audience to support me directly with these small payments. So I think we've got to just realize that there are new podcasting platforms appearing other than Apple and Spotify that are and YouTube that are offering different ways for podcasters, creators, musicians, audiobook authors, etc., to generate revenue. And True Fans is just one of those.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we got a question from the Basement Show with Mr. Canast. Taking content from multiple streams can be good and bad. Good because the streamer gets his name out there, but can be bad because someone could take their concept for their own channel. I'm not exactly 100% following the issue there, but all this content can be grabbed really no matter what. So it's just a matter, just because it's on multiple streams doesn't make it more vulnerable. So I think if you're concerned about people putting it on their own channel, that's an issue that each of these platforms should be addressing, is kind of copying content and republishing it off of channels that are not theirs. But YouTube kind of a little bit encourages this to some degree with how they have playlists set up. So it's not really stealing your content. It's still going to be playing it off your channel if you're talking specifically about a YouTube type of experience. If you're talking about more like a downloadable podcast or something like that, I can see where a person could grab an MP4 file and still kind of put it out there. But so I hope I answered that question. But let me pull this down and let's talk. Let me just mention something really quick too. Let me go back to. I need to get both of us back up here. So I am going to have a giveaway at the end of the show, a StreamYard giveaway for a Puddles duck as well. And you can see it behind me on the shelf back there. It's Puddles duck and a Puddles StreamYard mug. So at the very end of the show here, which will come up at the top of the hour, you can enter #TheYard, and that'll get you automatically added into the giveaway, because StreamYard does have a giveaway tool at StreamYard.com/giveaway. So if you're a StreamYard user, you can tap into that giveaway tool if you have something that you want to give away to your audience during the show. And it's just a matter of creating a hashtag that basically they enter into the comment field of any of the viewing platforms that they're tapping into. And so what's really interesting about this correlation between what we're doing here with StreamYard, with the flow of comments coming in, where there's kind of like an aggregation of comments. Sam, the Podcasting 2.0 initiative has a similar functionality in RSS. It's kind of a way to share comments across podcast listening platforms. And it'll be interesting to see if the industry supports that ability. Here as we look to the future, kind of like the experience that we have with StreamYard here, where we're taking in comments from 2 or 3 different consumption platforms at the same time. And it creates an opportunity of creating a real interactive experience in the program, especially if it's live, like this show is. And really tapped into it and leaned into it and really take advantage of it on this show and to really build a community here, Sam. So it's an opportunity to really connect at a deeper level with audiences. Now, granted, live has been around for a long time, um, and but it's also the technology of doing it has not always been very good. I know I've done a live show for like 12 years with Todd Cochran with the New Media Show, and we've never really had a good interactive kind of experience with it. Sure, we could look at another screen and pull in a Facebook comment or something like that, but that was never able to be displayed on the screen like this, right? And
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to be talked about. So thank you everybody for entering the giveaway. I appreciate that. I'm going to go in and activate that, and so it'll collect everybody's entry, so we can do that. So it's really an opportunity to create a deeper level of engagement, and I look at the Podcasting 2.0 initiative as an opportunity for trying to enable some things in the podcasting space that really haven't been there before. It, podcasting is not typically a live experience, though there is a tag in Podcasting 2.0 called the lit tag that, and this alternative enclosure opportunity does give the opportunity to put in an HLS stream, which is basically a live audio or video stream. You can basically stream just about anything. And I know that there's some talk about being able to enable that to take a link to like a YouTube video too. So it's kind of an interesting convergence that's happening, and I love that term in the context of what's happening with podcasting right now.
Yeah. I
That's the
think,
direction. But yeah, go and share your thoughts on all that.
yeah, look, I think what we're seeing is that YouTube has had the lead in video, right? And with this streaming type comment, if you look in YouTube as a YouTube player, right, and you've got super fan chats and you've got payments and you've got comments, so they've had that. I think if you look at Spotify, they're not quite within the comments section. They don't have it, but they have other things. Apple certainly doesn't have comments. I think what I would say is there's three core pillars that podcasters or podcasting 2.0 developers like myself are looking at is discovery, interactivity, and monetization. So
Mm-hmm.
what we foresee as the problems with current podcasting are those three. So let me explain. So generally, if you're trying to find a new podcast, it's word of mouth. Hey, have you seen that great new podcast? Or have you, someone recommends it to you? Well, now with Podcasting 2.0, you've got better search capabilities because you can search by the person, you can search by the country, you can search by keywords, by categories, not just the title. So, and there's more to it than that. With interactivity, now we're starting to see comments appearing within podcasting apps. So that's going to give you that similar sort of capability. It's not quite aggregated like you've got here, where you're pulling in from 3 different sources, but it's coming. And then in the monetization, as I said earlier, there are new models appearing, but they're still overly complex and they're still very geeky. And one of my favorite sayings is complexity has failed simplicity. And what we're seeing here is it's overly complex, but it needed to be to make it work. And now what's happening is they're removing all of the geeky words around it and all of the bits and pieces. So I'm old enough, because I used to be Netscape's product manager, to remember when we first had to explain how to get a browser, then the TCP/IP stack, and then explain what HTTP was and www, and people were like, that's never going to catch on. And then Microsoft put in the TCP/IP stack into the browser, into Windows, and they added a browser. And so all it was one click to get online to the web. And then suddenly Google appeared with a search engine. There were search engines before Google, but suddenly it was easier to find web pages. It was easier to get online. It was easier to understand how it all worked. And so what I think we're seeing with podcasting 2.0 right now is, for the last couple of years, the geeks like me have been working on the technology of making these, new ways of interacting with podcasts, and those are now becoming matured new features where people are beginning to understand how to use them, implement them, and the hosts are now putting them into their platforms, and apps are beginning to expose them within their platform. So these things take time. It may be another year or 2 years before we, get the mass audience to understand what we've been doing for the last couple of years and how to use it and how to improve their reach or interact with their audience or get monetization from their audience. Or so there's a new feature been added to the RSS called a pod roll, and a pod roll is just a list of podcasts that the creator recommends. So, hey, thanks for listening to my podcast. By the way, here's the 3 or 4 other podcasts I would recommend you listen to. They might be other podcasts that creator does, or friends of that creator who, again, want to reciprocate. Maybe, if you promote me, I'll promote you. So all of these nice, simple new features just take their time to become embedded. The biggest problem is that Spotify and Apple probably won't implement these in the same way. They'll do it proprietary in their own way. And the problem is the market share is all with Apple and Spotify and YouTube. So the challenge for the new podcast apps is to implement these new features, make them simpler and easy enough for people to understand and show the value of them, and then at the same time grow market share. So instead of being 5% of the market, it becomes 25% of the market. And then suddenly Apple and Spotify go, oh dear, we're losing market share. We better adopt some of these new features. And that's when I see the bubble bursting on their side. But that could be 2 years away before that happens. So it is slowly catchy monkey, build the features, take the early adopters, and then I don't know what the event will be that turns the mass market on to understanding about how to use these things. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder as we look to the future, like a platform like a StreamYard being able to stream directly into that alternative enclosure tag in the RSS feed that then is made available live inside of one of these podcasting 2.0 compliant podcast apps. And so you'll be able to watch that whole video experience right in that podcast app.
Well, we've talked about it before, you and I, Rob, and I'm going to go and see the StreamYard guys. I don't know if you can give me an intro to who I should talk to, but there's a couple of guys here. And one of the things we said was, look, you know, when you set StreamYard up, you're saying, right, I'm going to broadcast this to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. And they've got endpoints where they take the video live stream that you've got here and they broadcast it on your behalf. What they're doing is providing you, the creator, with a live server. You don't need to know how to set that up. You just use the app. And then you need to know the endpoints. Well, exactly the same thing could happen, which is an endpoint could be TrueFans or Fountain or Podcast Guru or a generic Podcasting 2.0 app endpoint, right? And you just pick the one you want. And so you add that in the same way you've added Twitter and Facebook, and suddenly what you're broadcasting live here gets broadcast live across all the Podcasting 2.0 apps. And that's fairly easy to do. So then afterwards, when you save this recording, you could then put it into an RSS feed and add the video stream element in the alternative enclosure. So now you've got an audio and this video within one feed. This stuff isn't hard, but it takes someone to go and talk to StreamYard and say, by the way, these are the little tweaks you need to make to increase your reach to other platforms. And they might not even be thinking about it. They might be thinking, well, we need to improve some of the other features. But if somebody explains to them how they could actually, just with a minor tweak, increase it to 6 or 8 new apps with a bigger audience coming in from those apps as well, then that's a game changer.
Yeah, I agree. It's really an evolution of the medium to kind of move the industry in a little bit of a more of a converged approach to this. And I think we're definitely able to kind of get there. It doesn't seem like a heavy lift for the industry to be able to support an HLS type of distribution into RSS, which means that the podcast hosting platforms need to add that alternative tag option. Then it's just a matter of the creating platform like a StreamYard creating a URL that they can put into the feed.
Yep, and that's happening. So for example, Blueberry, RSS.com, Hubhopper, and Captivate at this conference have said they're going to support the alternative enclosure, and that'll be very quick. They will allow the thing that I described earlier about taking your YouTube URL and putting it in and switching. But RSS.com are announcing in the next couple of weeks a HLS service as a host. So you'll be able to go to RSS.com and just, instead of understanding the technical, just very similar to what you've done, click a box, put the start time, put the end time, press publish and go live. And that's how it's going to work. So I think it's coming, as I said. I know Blueberry are working on something. I know a couple of other podcast hosts who are looking at it. And so, one of my predictions for 2024 was by the end of the year, I think we'll have harmonization across the hosts in terms of the features and functions they support from the podcast 2.0. Some have put the value for value wallet in, some have put audio and video in, some have done this tag, some have done that tag. But what you'll find is they'll run out of tags not to put in, and so they'll look at what's left to put in, and they'll put those tags. So I think we're okay. I think once we get RSS.com, I think RSS Blue are doing it, and Podhome are doing the HLS service. Then I think more podcasters will then do what you do, which is broadcast live, and then they'll have interactive comments coming back through the podcasting apps. Now, how does StreamYard stay in that market space is they use the fact that they are also a live broadcasting tool,
right?
But they need to have new endpoints which are to the podcasting 2.0 apps for this video to be broadcast. And so, I think we will see more and more live shows because live becomes much more easier to actually do without you having to be a geek.
Well, and also there's another element to this too around live that we all have to consider too, is around what's happening with video AI. Is that live will be a way, now granted, it can be hacked. I mean, live can still be hacked, but it may be difficult to create an AI experience around video that is an interactive one with audiences that can respond to questions and comments and be much more interactive with its audience. So it may be a way of showing authenticity when AI content becomes more, like I say, more ubiquitous out there of people doing it, which I think is coming. I think that YouTube put out a kind of like a new rule this past week that any AI generated content on the platform, and I'm not talking about descriptions or actually post-production or pre-production planning, more like using AI to misrepresent on the video side. It's going to be an interesting kind of line that they're going to have to walk, and a lot of platforms are going to have to walk this line too of what they accept as okay on the AI side and what they don't, and where that line's going to divide, I think, is really around issues of misrepresentation or fraud or deception, right? So I think we're getting into a whole nother level of the need for moderation, content moderation, and it's a little bit of a worrying sign for me. But I think as we look to this new technology coming, I think it's going to become something that is going to increasingly become an issue, and live is a way to counteract that to some degree.
I mean, voice cloning now. I mean, you and I could read a sentence of about 20 or 30 words, and an AI would clone our voices, right? And then you could put a transcript of whatever.
Yeah.
You could have me saying, I'm a Nazi and I hate whatever, right? And it would have my voice, and it would maybe even have my image dubbing that, right?
Well, that's what YouTube is going to do with translating into different languages. So
then that gets put out, and then I'm going to have to be spending all my time going, that wasn't me, that really wasn't me on this. And that's the problem, right? So if the cat gets out the bag and we don't stop it. So the AI announcement from both Apple and YouTube was a terms of service change. And it was just simply, I think, the first step in them protecting themselves from somebody who does put out AI with fraudulent commentary or information. And then they can simply point to the article within their terms of service that says, we said you weren't allowed to do this, so we are fine, right?
Right.
I don't think they're going to moderate or check whether it'll be practically impossible, because even if you were putting out a video that had false information in it, YouTube would have to listen to every video and then fact check every video. That ain't happening. That is not happening. So,
well, they already have an algorithm running right now to analyze, especially because they're pulling transcripts now. So they can actually get detailed word by word context to what's being shared in the videos now. So
they can have keywords, like if you said the word,
phrases, right?
So if you said the word Nazi in Germany, right, you will actually get fined very heavily, and so will the platforms be immediately responsible for taking down that content. It's against the law in Germany to say that. So if that's the case, the best you can hope for right now, even with AI doing it, is looking for keywords or trigger words or whatever, but using whole sentences that are in effect unfactual, right, or basically downright lies. I'm not sure they can fact check that in real time enough to be able to do that, or even post.
Correct.
I think it's a game of whack-a-mole. I think they'll be playing a game of whack-a-mole, trying to keep people from not using AI to put out false commentary. So the best that they can do is simply to say, if you do it, we are not responsible, and that's like a Section 230 safe harbor type protection. And that's all I think they can do. Maybe in a few years' time, there will be cleverer AI tools that can fact check the AI in real time. I don't know, but right now, I think that's going to be a very difficult game to play.
Yeah, and Beauty Bubble has a comment too about the the topic that we were talking about HLS streams, which is basically a video streaming stream that you would be in control of to some degree. You would create an account at another company, and you would point like a StreamYard to that company, or StreamYard could create a HLS stream too. So it's just a matter of who's doing the HLS stream, that you would get a URL and you would just put it in the RSS feed, just for those that don't understand how that works. So it's not really a destination issue, but it could be, right? It depends on what the integration level is between like a StreamYard and a podcast host. But I wanted to also just bring up quick here. There's a screen here that I wanted to share with, looks like, I wonder why it's not coming up here. Okay, it's not coming up here. Okay, this is a screen of James Cridlin, which is Sam's colleague that he does a podcast with, and so just wanted to show that on stage. This is from Podcast Movement earlier today, right?
Yep.
And
it is. Yep.
And you were on stage earlier today as well. And what was the topics that you were talking about today at Podcast Movement? I heard that it was a little bit of a tough conversation with a few of the panelists up there about what was happening in the medium, right?
So I have a view, and right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. It's a view. That today's advertising model is a little bit like the Emperor's New Clothes. I'm not saying advertising doesn't work. It does, right? In that people hear a message. But fundamentally, we saw with Apple recently, with the number of auto downloads where they cut them off at the knee, reduced the number of downloads that people had within their metrics. So before you might have said, I've got 10,000 downloads, and then Apple went, nope, no, you haven't. They were auto downloads. They weren't real people downloading you. So now you've only got 5,000. And people would then go back to their advertiser and say, well, I told you I had 10,000. Now I've got 5,000. But we all know a download doesn't equal a listen, right? That is just not the same. And then equally, Spotify and Apple call a listen anything beyond 1 second. So if you've got your podcast player in Spotify or Apple set to autoplay the next thing in your queue, and then you suddenly don't really mean to play it because it auto plays it, that would be recorded as a listen according to the IAB and according to Apple and Spotify. But that isn't a real listen. So that was the first thing I said. And then the second part was I was talking to one of the people there, Rob Walsh from Libsyn, saying, look, you can't tell me that anyone actually listened to the ad. You can tell me that it was delivered and it was dynamically inserted, but you can't tell me that it was listened to. So I asked the audience, how many people here skip the ad? All the hands went up, right? So fundamentally, we've got this problem within podcasting, which I call the dirty secret of podcasting, is that it's the emperor new clothes. The advertisers are paying for adverts that no one's really listening to, and the numbers that they're listening to are very much smaller than they were before. And equally, there are no metrics that are going back to the advertisers that actually prove that any of it was heard in the first place. So it's a total lie as to what's going on in the industry right now. Now, there is a potential better model for this. And, it involves turning the model on its head a little bit. And again, this is not going to happen overnight. But in the microtransaction world, you can have listeners pay creators. Well, you can also, in the microtransaction world, reverse that flow of money for creators to pay listeners. It might be that they're launching a new podcast and you want to incentivize people to listen to your trailer, give them some small micro payments, for a 3-minute podcast trailer, and they might earn, 30p or 30 cents, right, from listening. But that in itself is a way of incentivizing people to listen to your content. Well, in the same way, if you've got a podcast and there's an advert, you can have an advertiser pay the listener to listen to the advert. Now, the micropayment allows the flow of money to go from the advertiser's wallet direct to the listener's wallet. What you get, though, is a true metric of that, how many people listen, because they are being paid to listen, right? So know the amount of money that's going out. But what's even better is Rob might get paid 100 sats per minute. I get the same, but Rob listens to 10% of the ad and then skips. The minute he skips, the payment stops. So the advertiser's not wasting their money. Whereas Sam decides to listen to 90% of the ad and then skips. So I get paid for that 90%. But also, the advertiser knows how long I listened. So they know the time I listened, the percent I completed, and the value they gave me in terms of money. So their budget is, not that, the old Ford model of, I know my marketing budget, but I just don't know where the 50% goes type thing. Well, in this way, there's no wasted budget, because the minute you stop listening, you just stop getting paid. So all of this is basically in contrast to the current model that we have today. And I think unless we as an industry adapt or evolve the advertising model, advertisers are going to become savvy to the fact that people aren't listening. They're not getting the metrics they want. So downloads doesn't matter. 10,000, 5,000, 5 million downloads, who cares, right? 10,000 listens, great, but did they listen to my ad? Well, if you can't tell them that they listened to the ad, then it's the same as just not telling them at all. And if you then go, and how long did they listen to my ad? Well, I can't tell you. Well, then there's no value. So we need to evolve the advertising model, or we will find one day the advertisers take their money pot and go to another platform which does give them better metrics about where their spend is. And so, we need to change. And clearly, there are too many people invested into the current model who are happy to tell advertisers that, spend your money with us, and loads of people are listening, honestly, but I can't tell you who, and I can't tell you how long, and I can't tell you, right? But other than that, please believe me, because if you don't, my business closes. So there's too many people invested into the old emperor's new clothes. Nobody tell the emperor that he's naked, pretend that he's got clothes on. Pretend that the advert was listened to by the listener, because if we tell them no one's listening, they won't advertise. And that's currently what's happening. No one's really listening.
Yeah, and I think you do have kind of a fallback that's happening in industry to the form of advertising that really built the e-commerce side or the advertising side of podcasting, which was basically host reads. But I did hear a little bit of commentary earlier this week about how it appears that, sure, host reads are effective. They've always been effective with podcasts and audiences. But there is a movement towards what they call talent reads, which is basically a host or a co-host doing the ad for the host,
Yep.
or a talented voiceover artist doing a host read as being almost as effective.
Yep.
So I think we may be seeing kind of a pullback from this programmatic advertising stuff, which is basically was driven really based on the radio industry pushing their way into podcasting and wanting to have the same kind of automated advertising that they've had in streaming radio for years and years.
I don't think there's a problem with automated dynamic ad insertion. I think the problem is
that can be utilized with host reads as well as talent reads. It's the programmatic advertising where it's like marketplace purchasing, and then the advertiser uploads a pre-recorded piece of ad copy or ad read that isn't related to the context of the podcast. It's kind of like running a Geico ad in your podcast, right? It's something that radio has embraced, but podcasting really hasn't really embraced that programmatic advertising model per se, but it's been growing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, with programmable money, we can do things like, pay the listener, pay the creator, split the monies, all sorts of things can be done.
Yeah, and with Satoshis and value for value models, right?
But I think the most important thing is not the micropayment mechanism, but I think it's rewarding the listener for their time and attention. The reason we skip ads is because it has no value to our time and attention. We're not getting paid to listen to the ad. The creator of the podcast is getting paid to serve the ad, and we're not getting part of the money split, right? So we're not invested. We're not bothered, right? So you now need to make the listener bothered, because if you can give them a small percentage of the money from the advertising spend, but the value of that money that the listener gets is actually then giving the metrics back to the advertiser to understand how their ad was served, who listened to it, and whether it was, how long it was listened to, then you've got a perfect symbiotic model where the advertiser is not wasting their money, they're getting the metrics they want back, and the money's being split however the creator wants, 50-50, 80-20, whatever. And that's the model we've got to move to. But that is such a big leap of transition from where we are today that most people can't get that around their heads. They're like, no, that'll never work. And the problem is we've got probably 20 baby steps, or big giant baby steps, to make before we get to that model, because we need to make sure that people understand what the hell is a SAT, what is a wallet, what is a micro payment, what is how do I do it, where do I find this stuff from. So once we've got people understanding those basics, then we can put interesting revenue models on top. But those revenue models won't be there tomorrow anyway.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't entered the giveaway, please type in #TheYard, and I'm going to be giving away, just in a couple minutes here, I'm going to be giving away a StreamYard Puddles Duck with a StreamYard mug. So that's what's coming up next here. And also keep in mind that this show is an audio and video podcast. So if you want to follow it in Apple Podcasts or in Spotify, you can find a different version in the Apple podcast between video and audio, but in Spotify, it's audio only at this point until I start uploading to their video consumption experience. But Sam, I appreciate you joining me, and I'm going to pull up to the stage the giveaway tool. So go ahead and enter, if you haven't yet, into the drawing. It looks like we're up to 29 entries so far. So go ahead and put in there the #TheYard, and that'll get you entered into winning the StreamYard Duck Puddles and the StreamYard mug. So I'm going to pull this. I'm going to hit this draw button here, and we'll find out who the winner is. So let's do that here, and I'll start some music playing here, and we can do that.
Rob,
here.
While you do that, thank you very much, sir, for having me as a guest. I must rush off now, but have a great. We'll catch up very soon, I'm sure.
All right.
Have a lovely.
All right, Sam. Thank you so much.
Take care, my friend.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye, Sam Sethi. Yep. All right. Well, let's go ahead and pull the trigger here and figure out who the winner of the drawing is tonight. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. Oh, Mutt Nuts Crazy Craft. I think you've won before, so I think this is your second win. So I appreciate it. I guess the more times you enter, the more chances you have to actually win. So I think that's the key takeaway here. So if you want to, I think you know the routine here. Just send me an email with your address. I think maybe I have your address actually now that I think. So let me pull this up and just to confirm, send me an email with your address and I'll be happy to get that request in. And if you wanted to maybe get a different swag or something like that, we can probably swing that as well, like a StreamYard hoodie or something like that as a replacement for puddles or something like that. If you would prefer that, just let me know in the email what you'd like to do on that, and I'd be happy to actually do that. So, well, thank you everybody for joining me. And if you wanted to catch me on YouTube as well, you can certainly go here. I have a YouTube channel myself, and let me pull this down. And I'm also on X and have a website, robgreenlee.com as well. And if you are not currently a StreamYard user, I do have a code that you can use to get access. Let me pull that up on the screen here. A free trial as well as a lifetime discount. So just go to streamyard.com/RobG to get that free trial. And I appreciate you being here with me tonight in my special episode from Podcast Movement. I am back with another episode tomorrow night as well. I've got a couple of terrific guests on that are going to talk about how to be compelling on camera. So a couple actors and producers out of Hollywood that are going to join me and talk about how to create compelling video content. So I certainly appreciate you being here. So come back and join me tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific to watch that episode. It should be very, very, very helpful and very interesting. And I'm going to be listening too, because I want to learn from them as well and try and implement some of their cool ideas that they've learned from many years of working in Hollywood with actors and things like that, to have actors come across very natural and very kind of compelling and entertaining and all those kinds of things. And they have a lot of tips and tricks that they're going to share with us about how to do that. So I appreciate you, like I said a couple times here, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the comments and the thread here. Podcast Movement, a lot of folks down there are out to dinner and doing all sorts of evening activities. So I was lucky to get the folks that I got on this show calling in. So I definitely appreciate your patience and being here. So I'm gonna sign off and leave here. So let me pull up a few more comments here to let's see here. Let's see if I can. Let's see here. Beauty Bubble commented in here as well. The entire conversation between professionals is such a breath of fresh air and considered ideas that have been so enjoyable. Well, thank you so much, Beauty, for being here and supporting this show and always being there with terrific comments. I appreciate it a bunch. So, and it looks like looks like okay, I own 3 of the hoodies. So why don't you go to the merch area for StreamYard and see if you can pick another item or something like that. I'll be happy to, if it's sunglasses or if it's some other item or a StreamYard sweater or something like that, I can send in that for you. Muddy Nuts Crazy Crafting. So, and then it looks like 88 is said, thanks, Rob. And the Basement Show says, good night, Rob. Awesome show as usual. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the support here of this community. Johnny said, great show, Rob, at StreamYard. And it looks like a Muddy Nut or Mutt Nuts Crazy Crafting says, I will look through the merch area and pick out something that she doesn't have yet. So, or he, I'm not quite sure. I can't tell from the picture, but well, thank you, Uncle Fatty. Much love to you as well, and thanks. So, good night, everybody. I appreciate you being here. Go check out podcastmovement.com if you want to follow it, and then there's a lot of pictures and videos being posted on all the social platforms about the event. If you want to keep track on the thoughts and photographs and videos coming out of Podcast Movement, you can certainly do that. And if you just go to this website too, you can also see more about the conference and what's happening in Los Angeles. It goes through Friday, and so, like I said, this is the first one I've missed, so I wanted to have some connection with the event, and doing this live show tonight was kind of like a bonus episode. But I'm going to do my regular show tomorrow with some compelling guests that will be interesting for everyone. So, good night, everybody. Thank you so much.